Mr. Cotton. And please introduce yourself for the record.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Please introduce yourself for the record before you begin your testimony.
My name is Elmore Cotton. Everybody calls me Mo. I don't know where that came from. I'm a veteran. I was in the USMC, Marine Corps, excuse me, during the Vietnam era. I was not in combat, but I was around a lot of, I was living in Okinawa and around a lot of military that got the habit of smoking marijuana. But I am here as a patient to declare the fact that I have had cancer since the 2000, that's almost 19 years. And I was very, very happy when the public of Guam voted that they wanted to see marijuana available. And it was, then there was a very close effort to have medical marijuana approved. I was happy to hear that too. I'm not in pain, by the way. I've had other ways of taking care of my cancer, which is growing, by the way, but I'm 83 and I'm still not taking, what's that other thing? See, my brain's gone a little bit before, and I don't smoke marijuana. But anyway, I'm for it because there will come a time when I may be in pain, and it would be nice to have something available that I know is being used for that purpose. But I'd also like to say that I have a daughter that lives in California who smokes marijuana oh gosh, she's going to kill me. She smokes marijuana every evening so she can sleep, but she used to drink, and she doesn't drink anymore. So for those of you that think that smoking marijuana is going to lead to other drugs, it might be just the reverse, because it is a pacifier. So I'm in favor of this because it's not really what I would like to see. I'm frankly for recreational marijuana because I think that would be easier for Guam to pass than something that's very restrictive. But only reason I want recreational marijuana is I don't want to get my doctor into trouble, who might get into trouble by some legal problem. I was hooked on Percocet for a while after a very painful operation in my ear, cancer. I had 4 operations. 2 of them went right into the cartilage, and that is very, very painful. So I got 5 marijuana pills. Later, I was up to 90 a month. I got off it. I cold turkey myself and got off it. But there are things out there that are really, really, they work, but they're also addictive. And I think I'd rather be addicted to something that I think I could use instead of alcohol. People are worried, what happens if children get a hold of it? Well, the same problem we have with alcohol. What happens if your kids are getting alcohol? You have to stop them. So I'm not worried about that. I think there will be cases where marijuana would be used for people under 21. I've heard of that. Children who get different medical problems are helped by it. But I believe this is a step in the right direction because I'd frankly like to be able to use it myself if I'm in pain. And it may be coming. As my cancer grows, that problem exists. So I sit here patiently waiting for the fact that there will be a time when I could use it myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cotton. I'd like to now allow my fellow colleagues here to comment or ask any questions they may have, beginning with committee members and beginning with Senator Regine Bisco-Lee.
Suzus Masi, Mr. Chair, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank everybody who's provided testimony today. There have been some in opposition and some in support of this bill, but it's really important for all of the members of our community to come out and let us know what they think and let us know how we could potentially improve this bill, if they're completely against it, what their reasoning is. And I also especially want to thank our veterans who've come forward to give us their testimony today. We thank you for your service, and we thank you again for continuing to participate in this process. That's really what's going to help us to have the best results at the end of all of this. So I really just want to thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us this opportunity. I know that there's additional opportunities for testimony, I believe, later this afternoon and into the evening. And then we also just want to encourage people to provide testimony, even written testimony. They can email it into the committee. But it's so important for us, if you have a concern about this bill, if you are in support, in opposition, we need to hear from you. And that doesn't mean commenting on Facebook, because we don't, that's not we don't accept that as testimony unless you email it in or you hand deliver it. So we really want to encourage our community. I know a lot of people have been participating in this discussion on the radio and other things. So we really just want to encourage the public to come out. This is a big issue with lots of potential ramifications and potential benefits. So we want to continue to have that discussion, and it's so important to hear from all of you. So thank you very much. Suzus Masi.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Pito Terlahi, any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I really do appreciate the comments that were made on the pros and cons regarding the Cambridge Sativa type of plant. There's issues that, and it's good that we have this interaction, not dyadically but monologically, and it's giving me the insight to decide based on the pros and cons that were raised this morning. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for your interest in giving us your insight and in making us make our own decision, make the right decision, if you will, in regards to passing this particular bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Senator James Moylan, any questions or comments? All right. Go ahead, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate something that Mr. Camacho had brought up, and that this is something, I have a number of questions for some of our government agencies and other government partners, and so I really hope that they also participate in this hearing today, because we have a lot of questions that we wanted to ask them about kind of the implications of this bill and how it would affect their particular agencies, and any questions they might be able to answer for us. So I agree with you, Mr. Camacho. I think we need to hear from some of the agencies in terms of how this impacts them. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Tello Taidagui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone that came out today to testify in favor and not in favor of the bill, and those who just want to see a good bill put together to ensure that, we have all the right amendments that could go into this bill to make it stronger. And that's what I'm here to listen to, the testimony of everyone's concerns, so that this bill can actually help those who need this type of assistance. And I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Cotton, for taking the time. I know in your condition it's very difficult to make this trip, and I see that your passion with regards to on the medicinal side, and now on the recreational side, I see to going to something that's less invasive to your your body, and appreciate that comment, especially coming from. I have a sister too, as well, who actually has lung cancer, and I'm grateful for that. I had a mother, the same thing happened to her as well, and greatly appreciate you being here. It's difficult, but I appreciate everybody's concern, and we're looking at what's best for our island, and I really think that the more testimony that comes forward and your concerns will be helpful to us. So I encourage that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Titagui. Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano.
Buenas and Hafide. I want to add to my colleagues in thanking everybody for coming here. It is important to hear all the pros and cons that the community feels. I mean, it's important to be able to hear it all, to understand their concerns, and then to weigh it and hopefully address as much of it as possible. So I have a few comments on ways that perhaps we could strengthen what is here, or questions that could be answered. One of them, I know that the way that the bill is written is looking for the rules and regulations for cannabis establishments to be set up by a control board. And so even though labeling will probably come underneath that, I just want to encourage really strong labeling be part of what they are setting up. I think that's definitely really important. It needs to be very, very clear to everybody what the product contains, especially if it's been placed into a consumable like edible brownies or cakes or things like that, that the labeling needs to be very, very clear. And also, with the board, I believe there's language in there that gives the board the ability to look at the books and the records of the distributors and those setting up establishments, and that there's a representative from Rev and Tax on the board. So it seems to make sense that that Rev and Tax representative would be part of the looking at the books and records, and then therefore kind of being able to make sure that we have somebody from our agency being part of that process, and then therefore just kind of strengthening that review. One of the things that I'm interested in learning more about is with the prohibitions on driving under the influence and how that's typically tested for. At this time, I don't know. We're trying to look it up, but maybe somebody has the answer for that. And just making sure, oh, here I'm sitting next to Senator Pito Terlahi, baby knows. Making sure that that's a feasible test and is able to be implemented most easily and in a most cost-effective way so that it's something that can readily be utilized and meet its intended purpose. With those rules and regulations, I'd also like to see that they be established but then come back for legislative approval, just to have that final oversight by us on behalf of the community to make sure that everything is strong and in place in a way that makes sense to us for safeguarding the community. I'm also trying to look up, I understand that, I believe it's section 9, but one of the sections is removing the penalty for the distribution of less than a pound of marijuana, and they use the term pound because that's what's currently written in the law, but I'd like us to further examine what's typical personal amounts to be held in other models in the NMI, in other states. I may be incorrect. A pound seems like an awful lot for personal use to be walking around with or to be having and holding. So if we could just see if that's comparable with what other legislation has as an amount. Of course, not affecting the amount for medical cannabis. That is a different category of use, and its situation is different. So not in ways, as this act talks about, not in ways that affects the medical cannabis. And I'd like to, well, I'll be examining further, but I'd like to maybe hear, not necessarily from you, but from agencies about how they think this will affect tourism. And maybe, again, this is something to encourage for the control board, that they are looking at impacts to tourism and tourism, that type of tourism's impact to our community, to make sure that it still fits in with the community and safeguards the communities and the community's expectations out of the tourism industry. I'd also like to recommend that a percentage of the income generated from this industry, that be set aside for awareness campaigns, so that for the youth, we feel like we're really safeguarding them, and for the community at large, we're providing the right information so that they are making informed choices. So those are really largely my comments. I do think that there is value to this bill, and certainly for the medical marijuana aspects that we've tackled before and that would have some impact from this bill as well. As Senator Teitigui was saying, you know, many of us, if not all of us, have friends and family who would really benefit from the ability to access this. And I talked to one veteran, and he had shared that, you know, sometimes with the way that medical marijuana is set up, he didn't want to be tied to or regulated in those sort of ways. And there might be that feeling amongst others, that maybe there's a feeling of something associated with it, having to access it as medical marijuana. And so them feeling like their situation can be better supported, and they could feel better about it if it was a personal use and a personal choice. So Suzuis Masi, for all of the time of coming out here, I know it's not easy to come up and publicly testify a lot of times. It takes time. It takes standing before the community and all of us. So Suzuis Masi for that.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any other senators that would like to make some comments? Senator Joe San Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the folks that showed up today to testify for and against, but I also would be recommending, as the Oversight Chair on Appropriation and Office of Finance and Budgeting, we need to be concerned about the impact to the other agency, and Bill brought that up, the unintended consequences and the impact. We need to take a look at across the board, the same as what Dave brought up. We're going to have to take a look at every agency that it impacts. The medicinal is a separate issue. Recreational is for everybody else that wants to use it. And exactly what Mr. Clynton brought up, if you choose to use it, then go for it. One speaker, the teacher that spoke, as soon as he started talking about Denver, I put it up on my phone. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Most of his comments, I think his data must be pretty good, but it must have been yesterday's. Because when I looked it up, the fatality rate on driving has reduced more than 50% in Denver. Yeah, there's some issues with children. The dropout rates in education has pretty much hasn't changed or has gone down, the dropout rates, like it's doing on Guam. But then the question would be the unintended consequences we're going to have, the impact in the government of Guam. I'm not worried about the money we're going to make. We're going to make money if it passes. But how much money is going to go to public health? Exactly what Senator Kelly brought up, what everybody's been talking about. Where's the study? And if we want to ask the question of what's the impact on Guam, you can't have an impact study until something happens. Okay? We can use everybody else's study, but we always also have to remember, Guam is Guam. We are a captive audience. We need to make sure there's a good education out there about what is marijuana all about. Because we know what the benefits are for medicinal. That's separate. We got to make sure we stay focused. This bill is about recreational. This is not about medicinal. This is not about changing the medicinal portion. Stick to the recreational. What is the impact? We do need to get the other agencies involved, GPD, public health. Everybody's got to get involved. They got to sit down. And if they don't sit down with this bill, they will sit down during the budget hearing and ask, and I will ask that question, what is the potential impact at GMH, at the police department, at every agency, because we have to project that. We can't assume that if this bill passes, there's no impact on public health. There will be. There's no impact on revenue. There will be. May it be through collection, and maybe, I don't know, maybe the rate that he's got here, the $5,000 to get a license, maybe we need to make it higher. And we'll work it from there. But we'll measure it based on what they report. Every agency's got to report it. We need to ask the community, is this what you want? Because I've talked to a lot of folks, and half of them say, go for it. The other half says, I don't like it. So, I'm a co-sponsor of this bill. And I advise the authors that make sure all the mechanisms to protect it from children. And everybody seems to think that we're going to have people driving around smoking marijuana. It says, if I'm correct, it says you smoke it at home. They catch you out there, my God, put you in jail, teach you a lesson, follow the rules of engagement. That's all it's all about. And when we look at the impact in our community, we got to let our community know what's going on, what's coming down, what are the do's and don'ts, and we move from there. And we got to make sure, too, that everybody understand there's a bill to be paid. GPD, everything. Okay, so with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. Senator Kelly Marsh-Taitano, you had something else to add?
Sijus Masi. I do have a couple more questions. And so I think, again, in light of strengthening the bill, to make sure there's language in there that addresses those that are already serving time and how that will be addressed. And then also to look at, I know that we've all talked about getting some input from agencies, but to make sure that we understand how this affects both employer and employee rights. So if we could be looking at that as a body or the authors writing that as well.
Thanks, Senator. Just to clarify, the bill preserves the employer's rights to set their workplace policies. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to call up the next, if there's no other senators with any other questions or comments, I'd like to call up the next panel of